We're going straight into the currency front, and joining me on the line now is Brigid Taylor, Chairperson from Kaon Capital. Brigid, good morning to you. Let's get your initial reaction to when you first heard the news that Nhlanhla Nene has been axed as the Finance Minister of South Africa.
You know what, I think for me it's just such shocking news in terms of the fact that it's such poor timing. If we think that on Friday we had a downgrade from the ratings agencies, and predominantly what they were talking about was government spending. Looking at the fact that government spending is now sitting at closer to 51% of GDP, but the reality is that we're not seeing government spending in the form of social upliftment to the proportions that we'd like to see in terms of empowering the country. So that is a concern. And then on top of that, we've had this axing that also, goes around the story around SAA and this purchase of the government aeroplane, as well as the, dire fiscal scenario that's coming out of SAA. So there's a lot of negativity attached to this decision because of the assumption that the move is not, as Mr. Zuma said last night, in terms of replacing Mr. Nene and putting him into another strategic role. Why replace somebody who's doing a great job in a very, very prominent position and move him into something that we don't even understand as South Africans, never mind replacing with somebody we don't even know. So for me, this is an extremely, extremely negative move, and it certainly calls into question, what is the motive behind this?
Brigid, obviously yesterday we did see the rand sitting at 15 rand 38. This morning we're sitting at around 15.07. Is there further downside that you are looking at, or do you think that we'll possibly see the rand take more of a knock?
Look, I think that at the moment the market's in a little bit of confusion. I mean, we've only just opened up, so it's that initial knee-jerk reaction. Not surprising to see the rand a lot weaker, because basically what the market's saying is this is not a great decision, especially on the back of the downgrade from the ratings agencies, which puts us literally on the cusp of junk status, which from a currency perspective as well as from the investment perspective is extremely negative. So the timing of it is certainly not optimal. And, you've got to ask yourself, what is going on in the mind of the fiscus, where the government is already being drawn into question by the ratings agencies, the government's been questioned by the people in terms of delivery, and now you're making silly decisions that are costing us a rand at a time on a move. I think that we're going to initially see this knee-jerk reaction. The market's going to have to absorb the news, and it may have a slight pullback, but I think that the trajectory is firmly in place for a weaker rand.
Brigid, thank you so much for that analysis. That was Brigid Taylor. She's the chairperson at Kaon Capital. In studio with me now is Chris Gilmour, investment marketer and analyst at Barclays Africa. And we also do have Andre Cillier, who's joining us live from our Cape Town studio. He is the director of Treasury One. Good morning to you both, gentlemen. Let me start in studio here in Johannesburg with you, Chris. Initial reactions once again. What were your first thoughts?
To me, my first thought was disbelief. Brigid has encapsulated this very, very well indeed, in the sense that we've got a very, very fragile situation at this point in time. The last thing you need to do is to go and change direction, change the finance minister. And Nhlanhla Nene has been less than 2 years in the job. He's been doing a great job under extremely difficult circumstances. So to go and replace him, and with just a bold statement, no reasons why, then you can only by deduction assume that this is a politically motivated change. And then, of course, your imagination can run wild, and all sorts of things can come into play. But again, I think, as Brigid was saying last night, my first thoughts were, this is going to be terribly negative for the rand. Look, we have to perhaps get some sort of balance in play here. The Treasury is still going to be the Treasury. It's still going to be populated by people, by civil servants who do a very, very good job, again, under very difficult circumstances. So it's going to be very instructive to see what happens when Mr. David van Rooyen takes over. He's got a real baptism of fire coming up.
Yes.
Not just the circumstances that we've mentioned, but he's got a budget to prepare in 2 months' time. So I think it'll be very instructive to see what happens with that, and also, of course, politically speaking, with the municipal elections coming up in the middle of next year.
Policy continuity. Let's go to Cape Town, where we've got Andre standing by. Andre, let's get your reaction to the news regarding the axing of Minister Nhlanhla Nene.
Good morning to everybody. I think it is the most unthoughtful move that one could pull off at this stage. As an investor, I would be looking towards stability before I make a decision to put any of my money anywhere in the world. Mr. Jacob Zuma last night pulled that carpet of stability that was already a very, very unstable economy and pulled the rug completely out of the economy by doing this. So absolutely at the wrong time, a lack of total visionary leadership. The implications of this is, yes, there's lots of speculation this morning, putting it back to SAA, putting it back to all sorts of deals that could be done on the energy side, etc., etc. The question is not, we don't know what Mr. Van Rooyen will do. We have no idea. The previous speaker just spoke about a budget that needs to be done in 2 months' time. I'm sorry, but a budget is not done in 2 months' time. It's read in 2 months' time. It's busy being done at the moment. We have a brand new person stepping in, trying to do that. We have no idea what his skills are. We have no idea what his experience is. So I think absolutely the timing was completely wrong, and the implications will be far-reaching going forward.
Let's go now to Adrian Saville. He's a chief strategist at Citadel, and he joins us on the line. Good morning to you, Adrian. Hopefully we'll be able to get you on the line now. Let's get your thoughts of what you make of what is currently or what has unfolded here and what the implications are.
Good morning. I think I would concur with the observation that the timing is extremely unfortunate. It sits wedged right in between a ratings agency downgrade, which, if anything, was generous to South Africa, and just next week we've got the first Fed interest rate hike in a decade, and that has put emerging market currencies as an aggregate on the back foot. So being on the back foot with ratings agencies, being on the back foot with central bank action elsewhere in the world, we then have a surprise announcement, and surprise also is probably a very generous word. Not only is it, I think, a poor decision, the timing is particularly poor.
Adrian, one of the key themes that has certainly come through here is policy continuity. Your thoughts on this?
Well, there's a nod in the direction of policy continuity by saying that Nene will be redeployed to look after some other part of the public interest. But to my mind, that is nothing more than a very, very superficial cosmetic nod to try and give placate an already anxious market. This puts a clear question mark over policy continuity. The new Minister Van Rooyen has absolutely no track record to go on to guide us. So we don't have a sense of what his policy direction is likely to be. Having said all of that, let's not forget that South Africa has seen this before. And you might recall when Trevor Manuel was appointed as Minister of Finance. That was taken by the market with complete shock, and the response was extremely negative. And, of course, Trevor Manuel, I think, demonstrated one of the most impressive track records as Minister of Finance in the country in modern times. So that doesn't give us any assurance that the new minister will repeat that. But let's not lose sight of the fact that sometimes markets overreact, and this might be an instance of overreaction. Whether it is or isn't, what we have to wait for is the direction from the budget that will be read in February. Of course, that has a large legacy of former Minister Nene in there. It won't be the new minister's budget.
Thank you so much for that. That was Adrian Saville. Of course, he was joining us on the line. Annabel Bishop is now at the desk with us. So she is the Group Economist at Investec. Annabel, I'm going to get some initial reactions from you. Before we do that, though, let's take to social media, because as you can imagine, and you would have seen, social media has been ablaze. We do have Adrian Saville, who said the rand is slaughtered on Nene recall, of course, so we have definitely been tracking those particular movements. And of course, we will obviously be seeing how the different political parties will be taking full advantage of this. The EFF official account stating their view here, saying that this reshuffle is the most shocking news of the decade. With Zuma, anything is possible. Let's see what else we've got. Of course, Musi Maimani saying at this time, our country requires strong economic leadership. Tonight's decision regarding yesterday, of course, is something that people should be worried about. And of course, the DA, we also getting strong opinions coming through from there. We need a strong leadership in South Africa. And of course, more that is coming through, more from the DA. Certainly very vocal on this. And of course, we do have one of the viewers, Brandon, SA currency crashing because Zuma made another bad move. Bruce Whitfield, of course, is one of the CNBC Africa anchors here, telling us that till now Treasury has been treated with respect. I'm not easily dismayed by our politics. This is the most unsettling signal in a long time. Annabel Bishop, let's weigh in and get your thoughts. Is this also just very unsettling for you? Adrian Saville did say that this has happened before. Can we recover?
Look, I think we've seen from all the commentators comments that really show shock. You know, they're really showing a lot of surprise. So I think from that perspective, that has certainly created a lot of uncertainty for the markets. And our rand obviously is very risk averse at the moment. And that's been the key reason why we obviously have seen such a dramatic weakening in the currency suddenly. And also, of course, as well, we've also seen a dramatic weakening in bond yields. So this surprise move obviously has negatively affected the markets. I think even though when we had Tito Mboweni come in as the Reserve Bank governor, we also saw an initial negative reaction. And then after a while, people got used to him and, you know, it wasn't such a big deal anymore. So I think perhaps, you know, maybe some of the problem is that the ANC doesn't smooth these changes in, but just suddenly announces them, you know, as a shock. And perhaps, you know, a bit of a discussion, a bit of a lead into it. And maybe one of the key reasons is the markets don't know too much about our incoming finance minister. And if we did know more about it, you know, there wouldn't have been such a terribly negative market reaction. As Adrian says, it's quite possible he could do a very good job. I note with great interest that he's whip of the economic cluster transformation unit, and basically what they're looking at is transforming the South African economy. So from that perspective, there does seem to be a bit of a focus on growth. There's also a strong focus of transformation as well, with bringing him in, and perhaps that's some of the key reasons why this move has been made.
Before we go to Cape Town, Chris, let's get your thoughts. In the earlier panel discussion, we did hear Mohamed Nala speaking about the tone of the release or the press release from President Jacob Zuma, saying he spoke a lot about economic transformation. Could this maybe just be in line with having the new finance minister in place?
Look, as Annabel says, it could well be that. But you know what? Around the world, when you've got a situation when, and I don't actually want to use the analogy about alligators and swamps, but you know, we're in a situation where things are very, very fragile, and you just don't do this type of thing at this point in time. You let the incumbent carry on doing what he's been doing, because you know what? There was no indication that I got from anybody that he was actually doing a bad job. Do we need radical transformation in any direction at this point in time, other than adhering to some sort of plan? And I think that was the missing ingredient that came through in all of the ratings agencies' narrative last week, is that we don't have any kind of discernible plan that we're actually following.
Let's come to you now in Cape Town, Andre. Economic reform, that was one of the key messages that we got from the ratings agencies last week.
Yes, indeed. Economic reform was one of them. And what they had said is that on the fiscal side, we need to see changes, we need to see deficits being addressed, we need to see income being addressed. And that's the big uncertainty that suddenly unfolds here. We've had a Mr. Nene that was firmly on the path of cutting expenditure and firm to that, and realized the problems that the economy is facing. Now we are being faced with a new person coming in. As I've said before, we have no idea really who he is. We know very little about him. And so very little to criticize the man or say anything about what he's going to do. But the instability is there, and the unknowns are there. And until that does not get removed, we will have huge economic impact, especially from investment side. And now we are a week, or most probably 2 or 3 days away from parliamentary recess, where we will actually see very little coming out till the middle of January. So we are faced with a dark period, a little dark hole where nobody really knows what goes on. And I doubt whether Mr. Zuma will come out and announce anything further on what happens to Mr. Nene and clarify the decision that was made. So it puts a huge cloud over what we can expect from economic reforms in the right direction, pleasing rating agencies and investors alike.
Andre, we're going to pause this conversation. Of course, President Jacob Zuma did say that Nhlanhla Nene is going to be redeployed to another strategic. Of course, still with us in studios right here in Johannesburg, we've got Chris Gilmour, investment marketer and analyst at Barclays Africa, Annabel Bishop, group economist at Investec, and we've got Andre Cillier, director of Treasury One, joining us live from our Cape Town studio. Let me come back to you, Annabel, because during the conversation with Andre Cillier, he was talking about Nhlanhla Nene and what he's done during his tenure, cutting down on expenditure. You had a bit of a reaction to it. You shook your head. Why?
He's cut down on growth in expenditure, not on actual expenditure itself. So expenditure hasn't fallen, just the growth rate at which expenditure is expected to rise over the future period is likely to do so at a slower rate, and that's also in real terms as well, not inflation. So that's a very far cry from cutting expenditure. However, what's quite interesting is that under Finance Minister Nene, we have seen projections for our debt as a percentage of GDP rise just to under 50%, 49.5%. That's a ratio that's watched very closely by the rating agencies, and indeed one of the key reasons why we did see the ratings downgrade from Fitch, along with extremely slow economic growth as well. So I think, it obviously could go two ways. Perhaps we'll see a little bit more fiscal consolidation under the incoming finance minister. And it's quite interesting to note as well that we never reached fiscal consolidation under Finance Minister Nene, because the 3% of GDP kept being pushed out further and further into future periods, not necessarily due to any fault of himself, but as I said again, it could go two ways. We could start to see some fiscal consolidation and therefore a halt to the rating downgrades, because we are on a negative outlook now from Standard & Poor's. Or obviously we could see a little bit more latitude and could see a widening of fiscal expenditure. So that's one thing to bear in mind. But I think something quite key as well is that he is head of the economic transformation cluster. Economic growth was a key reason, one of the couple of key reasons for the downgrade from the rating agencies. Perhaps there's an expectation he could stimulate faster economic growth as well. But I think everything with the ANC always comes in twos.
Maybe this is part of the reforms.
Yes, everything comes in twos with the ANC. So I think what they would like to see now is faster economic growth and faster transformation as well coming at the same time. And perhaps Nene could have been seen as a stumbling block in some of those areas. But the bottom line is we don't know. And I think we're still waiting for a statement to come out from the incoming finance minister himself, which should give us clarity.
Chris, another strategic position, that's what President Zuma said for Minister Nhlanhla Nene. I want to get your view and your opinion on that. What is more important than being a finance minister? But also, is it possible to balance economic growth and transformation?
Yeah, coming back to Annabel's point, I think all of us would like to see stronger economic growth, absolutely. And we're not going to even remotely touch on our chronically high rate of unemployment unless we get growth rates in the 4, 5, 6%. But that's a bit of a pipe dream at this point in time. But also against the background of a very, very benign global economy as far as it's growing, it's difficult to see how we can extract any economic growth, particularly under the kind of policies we've currently got. So I think Nene was in a very, very difficult position. He was largely straitjacketed. So I'm struggling in my own mind to see what kind of policies could come out of anything that Van Rooyen may be even allowed to do. I can't see us getting lower taxes in this budget. I can only see higher taxes coming out of it. We're in an interest rate hiking cycle. So I think all of the ingredients are just frankly not there. Where Mr. Nene is going to go, I don't know. And I really do genuinely wish him the best, because I think he was a really, really good guy, and I don't think he deserved to be treated this way, frankly.
Chris, I'm going to cut in there because we do have to go to Goolam Ballim. He's the Chief Economist and Global Head of Research at Standard Bank. He's standing by for us. He's on the line. Good morning to you, Goolam. We've been asking every analyst that's come through to the studio and we've spoken to about their initial reactions and their implications. Let's get yours.
Thank you for having me. Well, at the outset, I'd just say certainly the unceremonious extraction of the finance minister certainly startled the markets, and dutifully so. This is an injection of instability at a time when South Africa needs to encourage a becalm state of macroeconomic management.
Goolam, I think one of the things that we have been talking about is policy continuity. We have seen the Rand react very strongly. The JSE this morning, we did see the banking sector coming under significant pressure. What would you say to investors that are looking to South Africa at the moment? Is this a cause to be concerned?
Enormously so, quite simply because we have not had policy continuity. If anything, in many respects, there has been, for the most part, policy stasis with only peripheral elements of reformist agenda. So what do I speak about? We talk when we make reference, for example, to the National Development Plan. The National Development Plan is held up as the high watermark of ambition, but how it drizzles, for example, down to the budget has been scant. Secondly, we've seen disparate, insignificant policy making emerge, for example, the visa regulations that were devoid of a socio-economic impact assessment, which would have been the purview of the National Treasury, for instance. So instead, we don't have clarity of policy making. There is no harmony within the various economic functions within the government. And at a time when we're staring at the potential for slipping into sub-investment grade, we have institutional instability injected into a reformist institution that is National Treasury, and an individual in the form of Minister Nene that served as the caricature for a reformist individual.
Goolam, are we likely to see investors leaving the JSE? David Shapiro was on the previous panel talking about who's invested on the local bourse and the flows that we might see going out of South Africa. Are you in agreement with this statement?
So there's probably two lenses by which we can judge it. Firstly, to the extent that South Africa now stands more greatly at risk of falling into a sub-investment category, that would preclude some international investment agencies from investing in South Africa. So quite simply, the universe of funding pools that South Africa could have attracted is probably going to slim. The second observation and the second lens by which we should judge this is many will probably deduce that South Africa's growth prognosis, while anemic to begin with, is likely to remain pretty weak and perhaps for an even more protracted period of time. And given weak growth would translate into lower earnings generation prospects, it suggests that the asset prices or prospective asset prices for South Africa is likely to be lower. So both in terms of earnings prognosis as well as South Africa being included, or South Africa's status as an investment destination as judged through the rating agencies, has suffered a blow. So naturally, South Africa is likely to be less a magnet for foreign capital, and even for local investment, South Africa has been further tarnished.
Thank you so much. That was Goolam Ballim, Chief Economist and Global Head of Research at Standard Bank. Let's go to Cape Town, where Andre Cillier is standing by for us. Andre, this decision has already been made. We do have a new finance minister, although a lot of the financial committee or a lot of the financial and investors community may not know a lot about him. Let's talk about strategies. What do you do now from an investment or investor perspective, and what is your advice?
My advice would be to really hold off on any further investment. And the only reason why I say that is for what our previous speaker spoke about as well, stability. We need to see a reassurance of stability before I can advise anybody to continue any further investment or into the economy or withdrawing investment. Equally, I would not run and take my investments out or sell everything. I would simply, at this stage, try not to be too emotional about the decision, but to wait and see and wait for reassurance from a statement from the new Minister of Finance, either him or Mr. Jacob Zuma.
Wait and see approach there, Annabel, but I know what's at the top of your mind is next year's elections, 2016.
We are in the run-up to the 2016 municipal elections, and I think recent events, which interestingly have come about around the medium-term budget policy statement, could have been quite a shock for the ANC. And obviously here we're talking about the reaction of the students, the storming of the parliament. Also we had the EFF march into Sandton as well. So I think from a populist point of view, there's been a lot of indications to the ANC that perhaps things are not as stable or as good as they were previously politically. And I think from that perspective, perhaps outgoing Finance Minister Nene might have been seen as a bit of a stumbling block for the ANC to try and achieve some of the objectives they feel will better appease the population. So I think from that perspective, we've also seen obviously them battling to pass the budget as well with the continued intrusions at Parliament. So I think from that perspective, perhaps he thought that he'd bring about a budget that perhaps might be, and here again we're talking from a populist point of view, seen as a bit more inclusive and something which obviously could perhaps provides more support to the ANC going into the elections next year. Because I think from an election point of view, it does seem, and we don't know for sure, but it does seem that the ANC may believe it feels it's a bit at risk in terms of losing a bit of support, because a lot of frustrations have been voiced from South Africans in the last quarter of this year. So I think, the sooner we get a statement from the incoming Finance Minister, the better, because it will provide calm to the markets and may also obviously give us direction into which way we're going to be going forwards. But lastly, there are quite a lot of challenges he's going to face in terms of funding lower costs for students and outright, obviously, no costs at all. Looking at even the minimum wage coming through, a lot of economic factors which are, quite broadly based and looking to support people right across the voter electorate, the key support base of the ANC. From that perspective, we also do obviously need calming comments from him from a business perspective, but it's going to be a very big act to juggle, and he's probably going to take a lot of direction from senior ANC policymakers. It's not necessarily going to be something he goes alone. And I think with outgoing Finance Minister Nene, he did hold quite a strong course on some issues, and perhaps there's a feeling that perhaps some of these issues might need to go in a different direction from the ANC.
We might need to bring calm. Chris, during the market update just after 9 o'clock, the JSE was still sitting below the 50,000 mark, sitting flat. Banks came under significant pressure. Help us make sense of what is likely to unfold today.
I think Annabel's spot on. Van Rooyen is going to have to come and try and calm markets. He's going to have to calm perceptions out there because of the way in which this has occurred. As we said before, it couldn't have happened at a worse time. So he's going to have a baptism of fire, quite frankly. He's going to be probed by the ratings agencies, he's going to be probed by foreign investors, he's going to be probed by local investors. And his reaction to that is going to be very, very instructive and informative. So how he handles it, we don't know. But one of the previous speakers said, here we are, we're going into parliamentary recess. And if I had to put money in it, I'd say he's probably not going to be that high profile for the next few weeks. And maybe only in January are we going to get a chance to actually do this kind of probing that I'm talking about. And I think that's probably the worst thing that could possibly happen at this point in time.
Andre, let's come back to you in Cape Town. Just in terms of some of the news flow that's come through, these reports have not been confirmed, but of course, after the axing of the former Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene, there's been subsequent reports saying that we might see more high-profile ministers being axed too. Is this something that you have heard about, and what would be your take on this?
There's certainly some talk about a possible new Minister of Energy Affairs, and that there could be a change there as well, which also not bode well for stability in the country or in a very troubled sector at this stage. So yes, I've heard that, I've read that, and I think it's now quite possible, with the moves that we've seen and the instability that was created in markets after yesterday's move, I think that might be held off. I certainly hope so. But yes, there is the possibility of further shuffles in cabinet. Somebody said that it's almost like a chess player setting up his chessboard for a battle, and there is a battle for political leadership in 2017, and Mr. Jacob Zuma is most probably setting up his chessboard in preparing for this battle. But that's concerning in the sense that you're placing your own agenda in front of that of the country, but he has said before that the ANC is more important than the country. It's now beginning to look that the president is more important than the ANC or the country.
Annabel, let's get some closing comments from you. We've seen a raft of economic data that's come out of South Africa that hasn't been positive. Sentiment has been sitting at an all-time low. Your outlook for South Africa?
Yes. Well, look, I don't think reshuffling the deck chairs on the deck is really going to change that, you know. So I think there are other factors at play about why economic growth is so weak. And I'm particularly worried about going into this December close period when you obviously have the end of the year or the close of the year, and when markets are very thin, it becomes a bit of illiquidity, and the rand could move quite dramatically on that, you know. So my concern certainly is for 2016, we're looking for a very weak economic growth here, and some of the factors which are impeding that growth have not been addressed, and those are obviously the threat to private sector property rights. You know, we're also having higher interest rates in an environment where all the other commodity exporting countries are cutting their interest rates, and obviously we're seeing weaker and weaker economic growth as a consequence of that. Higher taxes also coming through as well, also stymieing economic growth as well. So all of those factors, I think, add up to potentially quite a fragile 2016. I think we need a statement from incoming Finance Minister Rooyen sooner rather than later to both lay out some of his plans and also to really get an indication for financial sector markets about what they can expect going into next year. We don't want to come back to work and see the rand at 16.50, which is quite possible the channel that the rand has gone into, and of course that would then immediately, given the very hawkish nature of our Reserve Bank governor, spark off a whole series more of interest rate hikes. And I think from that perspective we'd be going into a downward cycle. We could actually go into a dwindling downward cycle, which very quickly pulls us into sub-investment grade, and as a consequence of that then we lose these credit ratings. Countries in sub-investment grade still get good growth, but it's not going to be in an easy environment. It's not going to be good enough to bring about rapid transformation. We need exceptionally strong economic growth of 5 to 6% plus to bring about transformation for the people in the economy. At the moment jobs are becoming fewer, not more. The cake is actually dwindling in size.
Chris, let's get final comments from you. A lot of the times when we talk about emerging markets and we talk about where South Africa is, there will be a lot of comparison being made to the likes of Brazil. People say, no, we're not as bad. It could be worse. But given everything that's currently happening now, are you still confident in South Africa?
Look, if you distill it all down and look at what's happened to the currencies, I mean, if you look at the rand, for example, until yesterday at least, relative to the Brazilian real, the Turkish lira, the Russian ruble, it actually wasn't such a bad performer. It was poor, it was weak, and the outlook was probably a continuation of that weakness, largely in line with other emerging market currencies. And I've been saying to so many people for so long, provided we don't shoot ourselves in the foot, metaphorically speaking, score own goals, you know, pull out all these traditional idiosyncrasies that we're so used to, then we'll probably just kind of stumble along in that way. Unfortunately now, this may well be one of those shooting in the foot episodes. And that being the case, as Annabel says, I think it's likely that the rand could demonstrate some profound weakness in here. Now, normally you'd get a self-correcting mechanism coming into play, whereby the weakness of the rand would attract foreign investment. But unfortunately, I think the fragility of the situation here, the instability that's been created around the rand, around the economy, is such that you're not necessarily going to get that self-correcting mechanism coming into play, at least not as quickly as would be anticipated. So again, unfortunately, I foresee a fairly poor outlook next year, 1%, maybe 1.5% if we're very, very lucky. And this just, let's give Mr. Van Rooyen the benefit of doubt and let's see what he has to say.
That's right. Let's wait for him to give a calm to the storm. Of course, we will be getting more information from him and finding out which strategic position former Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene will be stepping into. Thank you so much to my panelists this morning, Chris Gilmour, Investment Marketer and Analyst at Barclays Africa, Annabel Bishop, Group Economist at Investec, and Cillier, Director of Treasury One, who joined us live from our Cape Town studio.